Hello, and welcome to a sneak peek of Abundant Dance, where we help you to heal the soil, heal yourself, and thereby heal the world. Some of what's going to be happening in the first class is I'll be telling you a little bit about my own life, about how I became interested in gardening. We'll begin each class by setting aside everything we think we know and taking some time to get silent so we can have a new experience. Let me tell you, when I was growing up, we would go to my grandmother's house. It was Cedar Falls, Iowa, a very different climate from here. There's not 95-degree heat in the middle of May. There's not soaking wet clothes when you walk out the front door. It was different. And there was a strawberry field behind her house, and I remember as a boy running out to those strawberry field, and we would take the ripe red strawberries and steal them and come back and play in little creeks. And I had no kind of excitement or anything really for growing. My father had a garden. He grew cucumbers and squash and tomatoes, and sometimes I'd, as a punishment, and you can imagine I was being punished a lot, I would have to go and pull weeds around that garden. So that's what I knew of growing. But what I also knew is my grandmother's house, and how in the basement, this woman lived to be 95 years old. She weighed about 85 pounds and soaking wet, as they say. You could have wrung her out. She was just sinew and muscle and bone. And when I think about what I do and about my connection to the earth, I think about her. And I think about the things she taught me without even saying these things to me. For so long when I was growing, what I thought is I was trying to serve me, and I was trying to serve the people around me. And what happens when I'm looking at it from that point of view, it's about mine. And it creates separation. It creates separation from the earth and separation from my fellows. So for me, it's more than just growing food. It's about harnessing life, helping to foster life, and being a part of all that exists. So that I can sit and look out this window and watch starlings and blue jays. And did you know blue jays wake up earlier than any other birds? Like, you gotta get up really early to beat a blue jay. But I have seen some sparrows push blue jays away. They got to gang up on them. You got to get about 20 sparrows or so. Now, back to what I was saying. If I'm just thinking about me, I'm looking at that fig tree, I'm watching all these birds in there, and I'm becoming irritated. I think they're taking my figs. I can tell you I've gotten up the last 3 mornings and filled a colander. I believe that's the word, one of those white things with holes in it, with figs. It's enough. But when I'm coming from that world of mine and yours, and these bugs are bad, and this is good, and this bird is bad, and this is good, I miss those birds. And what else I miss was a big old raccoon that was on the branch and hanging perilously on the branch. And I get to see that. I get to have that magic. And I get to dry some of these figs. If I can believe in abundance, I believe what happens is I plant more. I spread it. And this is what happened for me. Okay, so I would go down in my grandmother's basement, and I would see those mason jars, and it didn't mean much to me back then. These quart jars, and inside different colors and different vegetables and green beans and that were canned. And who wants to eat canned green beans now? I tell you what, you put a little bit of vinegar and garlic in there, I'll eat so many canned green beans I won't even know what to do with it. We got long beans here. Thai soldier long beans, things that grow well, that are acclimated to this climate. But down there in grandmother's basement, it was a wonderland. It was something different, seeing all of those jars. I can remember it like it was yesterday. The first time I started growing college, or I wasn't in college, but I was living on a college campus, and I put some aluminum foil in this closet. I thought I was Marcel Proust. He wrote in a cork-lined room. I wanted to write in a room with foil, and I had the foil in there because I was trying to grow this stuff that you could smoke. I was in college. But we never know what something's going to lead to. And that led to me growing some tomatoes outside because I heard they could mask the smell of that marijuana. And so, just for any of you viewers that don't know me, I no longer do any of that kind of stuff. Haven't done any of it for almost 14 years. So, but that's how I began. And I got this excitement about growing tomatoes and then cutting my own tomato. And if I want somebody to be excited about eating healthy, they're growing the very thing that is healthy is what's going to lead most to that, to be a part of that, and to see something. I think I started with a tomato from the store, and I sliced it, and there were seeds, and I put it in some soil, and I was just surprised that it grew. And to watch it grow, and then to take it apart, that's called teasing the roots. What a beautiful, there's some beautiful expressions in growing. You take a bunch of seeds and they grow up, they have these little seedlings, and you pull them apart. They call that teasing the roots. And then you can get one plant and put it in another little pot and do that. And so I was excited and I wanted to grow everything. And from that, wherever I was, I grew. And I ended up in New Orleans. And in New Orleans, it's hot. And I was living in the third ward. I had a dry, that's a chicken. We got a whole ecosystem here. This is what I want you to know. Let the chicken decide. Perhaps the chicken's God in this moment. She seems to think so. Now, isn't that beautiful? What I want to say is there can be an entire ecosystem of all of it working together. And so I went from growing a lot of these annual plants. I was growing squash and cucumbers in the third ward. And what would happen is kids would come by. I also had some worms. I was doing vermicompost, which we'll talk about in the class. Anybody can do vermicompost. It doesn't smell. It can be done in an apartment. You can keep a bin underneath your sink, and you just add food scraps to that, and that's some of the most enriched soil possible. The kids would come over and they would want to see, they say, hey, my cousin's here from the east. Can we show him your worms? And they'd come and I'd show them all the worms, and 2 or 3 days later they'd come back and they'd have a plate of fried catfish or something to share. And what I saw was how my very act of growing brought people together. So I moved to a house, and in that house I had some neighbors that were helping me for a while, and we built boxes. Much of what you see at school gardens, at old folk, anywhere you see somebody starting, a lot of what they're doing is they're building boxes. And then you go and you see that those boxes are no longer being used. And I feel like what I've found in the last few years is a better way of not fighting with nature, of not trying to control things, of finding what works in our environment that doesn't need as much water, that doesn't need as much care, that bugs don't necessarily eat, and that can become abundant. And so this is some of what we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about, why do I think it's important to heal the soil? I discussed this a little bit. I'm not separate from the soil. I'm not separate from the earth, and neither are you. Everything that comes into our body that is good comes from this soil. I remember reading The Dust Bowl. It's about Oklahoma, They're probably going to write another one in 20, 30 years if we don't change our ways. But I remember reading that while I was teaching at a school with the students and trying to explain how what we're doing right now with monoculture, with growing corn for miles upon miles upon miles, is eroding the soil, is eroding the topsoil. We essentially live on about 6 inches of soil. And if it goes away, we're in trouble. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here to say that I can save the soil from one house in the 9th Ward of New Orleans. But what I will say is we can start to look at things a little bit differently. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when neighbors would trade each other. This neighbor might have some cucumbers, this neighbor might have some extra tomatoes. How can we best work together? If I've got a fig tree and somebody over here has a loquat tree, how about we share these things with each other? What might it be like to walk down the street where you are and see fruit that you can pick? What might it be like for a child to come and teach adults about longevity spinach, about moringa, which grows profusely here? I have one in the school garden that's 30 feet. It's its 2nd year. It produces these pods that I ate one raw today. And I felt the power. Look it up. Moringa is one of the healthiest things on earth. How do we mix natives, things that grow well, things that bring native animals, bugs, butterflies, all of this? How do we mix that with things around the world across the same equatorial line? We're going to be discussing some of this. We're going to talk about how your house, if I'm looking out that window right there, that's where I have the Suriname cherry. That's where I have the ice cream bean. That's where I have a star fruit. That's where I have a mango. We'll see what happens with it. That's also where I have a jaboticaba. Look it up, Brazilian grape. The fruit actually grows on the trunk of this. And this is possible in New Orleans. And it's possible because I have a pond and I also have some stone. So we're in zone 9B here. Using what's called a microclimate, I can create and push to zone 10A, to zone 10B. And if you're unfamiliar with those terms, I was too. All of what I've learned, I'm going to have a list of all of the books I've read. I'm available for questions. I'm available for consultations. I'm available for seeds. I'm available for all of it because we can't do this alone. I appreciate you. I hope that you will come and join us. And I look forward to doing these classes and learning just as much as the people who come. Thank you.